Marc, thank you so much for joining us today. It's so great to have you here as part of everything we're doing. Welcome, my friend.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. I love the work that you're doing, and I'm thrilled that you asked me to be part of it. Thank you.
Yeah, we met years ago at a Love 146 fundraiser. I've told everybody about that and how we met. You know, it seems like when God puts something on our hearts, like He gives us a vision,
Mm.
all too often we forget that we need provision for the vision.
Right.
Right? We respond to the call and set off on this journey before we create a plan to fund it. You're an expert in this space. You've been working with nonprofits and ministries for decades now,
Mhm.
written numerous books. Why do we get so hung up on asking for support, asking for money, what is it, man?
There's
Tell
so many
us.
different reasons. So the first thing I was thinking of is Noah was told to build an ark, but he was told to build the ark. It took him years to build it. It wasn't just like God said, "Here's an ark."
Yeah.
And so I don't know why we miss that, or Jesus saying, before you build a tower, you count the cost. Most of us don't. We think God has called us to do this. And I get emails every day or every week anyway from people saying, God has called me to do this important thing. And it is important things, but they don't want to do the work of connecting the provision part. So I think it's a nonprofit problem in part. I don't think it's just faith, where the people that are really good at seeing problems aren't necessarily it doesn't occur to them to resource the fixing of the problem. They're just rushing in. They want to fix the problem. And then it becomes this negative thing of, if I had more, I could do more. And it's your fault that you're not giving the stuff to me, you donors, you other people. Can't you see? Where
Yeah.
instead of saying, oh, maybe the fact that nobody else is addressing this issue is because they don't have the perspective. And maybe I need to be a connector and help them see, hey, do
Mm.
you see all the problems that are going on over here? So that's part of it. And then there's a lot of bad teaching in churches. And I've been a church
Oh, pick a
planner.
fight. Go ahead.
All right. All right. So there's been a lot of bad examples from, at least in the Protestant world, on use. I was a Protestant low church pastor, vineyard pastor, for 4 years of a church plant. And um, we don't teach money well. Most of the people that are pastoring churches are pretty terrible at managing money. And so we then think George Mueller is the only example. Which, for those of you who aren't familiar, George Mueller ran a large numbers of orphanages in UK a few hundred years ago, and his big thing was, I just prayed for provision. Well, the fact that we know the stories that he prayed for provision was that he had a network of people, whether it was a formal or informal, that were telling everybody else, "Hey, this guy just prays for God's provision," and it shows up. So there still was storytelling going on. And if
Yeah.
you know George Mueller's story, he was a financial manipulator. Like he was incredibly deceitful with finances. And so God's lesson for him was, I'm the provider and you are the provider with a small p. So we have a lot of it comes down to the stories we tell ourselves about money, though, too.
And a lot of that is baked into thinking that, and I know that this people preach this all the time. It's not that money is evil; it's the love of money that's evil,
Right.
and that is definitely important for us to understand. But we still get hung up on it, and we still and Mary and I've worked with so many leaders and missionaries over the years, and they will tell me this: I just hate asking, and I'm like, well, probably it's because you only communicate with people when you need something, and nobody likes
Good
that,
point.
you
Right.
know? And so we've been such an advocate for building teams, enlisting people who can help us share the story of the vision of the ministry. But I have found that people give to people first and to
Yes.
vision second. And
Hmm.
and as you've seen that in because you've worked with really big organizations, not just individuals
And
and
startups,
families
but yes.
and
Yeah.
startups. Tell us a little bit about what you've seen and how you may have even coached clients that you've worked with. Hey, you need to go do this. I'm going to fill your calendar with some appointments. Go meet people.
Well, and
How do
that's,
you get them to
yeah.
overcome that?
So as a Gen Xer growing up, the phrase that I came up with was "get real," because most of when I and it helps to remind you that we just have to be ourselves. We are exactly well suited for the position we're in because we are in that position. God seems to, glory in our limitations and our strengths. But the acronym REAL stands for R is research. So you research kind of, what is it you're asking for? Many people don't know. I had one Christian ministry guy. He had two different states. He had organizations, and he was starting a third one in Thailand. He called me for fundraising coaching, and I asked him, so how much are you trying to raise? Perfect, exploratory question. I thought. Took him 20 minutes to verbally process what it was. There were government funding, there were these other things. And then 20 minutes later, he knew what he was trying to ask for. So the research first is, what's the problem we're trying to solve, and how much do we need to raise to raise for that? And then the prospects, who are the type of people that will give to us? And nobody likes to hear this, but if you're just starting out, it tends to be your family, your friends, the people that you know. And I did run an article on 11 experts on how to find new donors. And because I get tired of saying, talk to the people you know. But those are the people you have connections with. And it is, like you were saying, it's about connections. So it's about the conversations. So researching is that first, but then you engage them. And my friend Phil Jones has a wonderful process of conversations. Regular conversations lead to curiosity, leads to conversations. Conversations leads to opportunities. Opportunities leads to asks, and asks lead to sales for him. But for us, it would be donations. I might have gotten the stages are about that, but it's building relationships with people that are mutual. So you're finding out about them, and you're letting them know about you as well, which we often don't do. Often we're so stressed out about talking about money. We think it's wrong to talk about money. Jesus said, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. And he didn't say that. He said, in giving alms, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, which was one of 7 Jewish ways of philanthropy. So it's basically just saying, don't demean the person that you're giving it to. Don't lord it over them. Just build up the people. Jesus is always about lifting up people and treating them as equals, not as, I'm better than you. So, sorry, I'm preaching, but as you do the engagement stuff, you're also building vision there, and it's because of a personal interest. And what I love about it, Mike, is you get to be sincerely curious about what the other person does. You get to really hear their story and that is a very intentional, strategic moving towards seeing if they're a good fit for your organization or your vision or your mission or your ministry. Then you do the ask, and the ask isn't, we have all these things going on. Would you pray for us? Would you do this for us? Would you do that for us? And maybe give to us? No, the ask has to be you have to respect the other person enough as an adult to make a clear ask for money of a specific amount. Will you please give X number of dollars, or would you consider? I love to say, Mike, I'd like to ask you to consider a gift of $10,000 for whatever the outcome is. And it's better if you can say, Mike, because you said this, I'd really like you to ask. I'd really like you to. I'm stumbling now, but I'd really like to ask you to consider a gift of $1,800.
Mm-hmm.
So letting them know what you mean, because when you say, would you support, you talk to somebody who you think is rolling in dough, and you say, would you support us? Their support may be $250, and then you get really bitter because you were thinking 25,000. You didn't respect them enough to. My wife, after 25 years of marriage, can't read my mind, nor can I read hers. Why would we expect a stranger to read ours?
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's a free tip that I was at the L. A lot of people are going to be like, wait a minute, what's the L in Get Real? We'll get there. But the way I was stumbling over that phrasing, if you're in ministry of any sort, unless you're a development professional in a ministry, but if you're a volunteer, if you're a CEO, if you're a pastor or something like that, I would name that stumbling. I would say, Mike, I'm so sorry. They didn't teach us fundraising in seminary. But so what happens, because if you're in the situation, part of it with the ask is if you're feeling stress, you're emanating that stress, and the donor's going to pick up on it, and they're going to think it's like a nudge. Maybe it's the Holy Spirit. Maybe it's something's just not right with this ask. The minute you own it and say, I'm really nervous. I love helping this thing. The fundraising part was something I didn't see was needed or incumbent. And so just bear with me. The minute you claim it to yourself, you free them up to actually hear your ask. So it's not being filtered through this. What is going on? Why am I getting this bad feeling about it? Yeah. So there's a lot about the ask. And then the last one is love. I've been around the block enough that you can't always love your donors. You sometimes like them, and sometimes you don't even like them, but you have to live with them. It's not like a sales machine. We don't have enough. Sales training will say, "Oh, it's a numbers game. Just throw all the numbers in the hopper, and some of them will go through." And we have to live with the people we're around. And oftentimes the people like pastoring a church, the people that are coming in may not be giving to you. But that doesn't mean that they're not there for ministry. And it doesn't mean that your call is not for them. So there's an ability of, the way I like to say it, and I love this about being a Christian that teaches even non-Christian organizations and stuff, because I feel like I'm a guerrilla evangelist. I get to tell God stuff without necessarily using God language. But the love step is, every human being has an estimable worth. They're worth more than the amount that they can give. And so if you, the sheer magic of this whole thing is, if you take a no well, if I ask you to give $18,000 to something, or $18, whatever the amount is for the cause, and you say no, and I treat you like a human being, and I don't ghost you, I don't cut ties, that speaks really highly for me as a fundraiser and my confidence in my call or in the ministry that we're doing. And it makes it so that when a time comes around, you're much more likely to think of me. And I've seen this time and again. It's just fascinating how people, we take it so personally. Instead of thinking we're asking them to fund something, even if it's ourselves, we need to think of ourselves as the organizational ourselves and then the personal ourselves. And so we're asking people to fund the organizational ourselves. And if they say no, they're just saying no to the organizational ourselves. They're not saying anything about our integrity or about their liking of us. It's not a personal rejection. It's just rejecting this. And it's their money. They get to say no to it if they want to.
I love these tips, especially the part about stumbling over your words. I feel like people overemphasize perfection. And they underemphasize connection. If you're starting with people who already know you, I'm recalling this one conversation I had with a young lady. This is years and years ago, and she was just getting ready to set off on a mission trip, or a 1-year commitment to missions overseas in Asia. And I knew her father. He was the pastor of a church that my friend worked at. I worked with her in a lot of ways because she was on their administrative team. I knew her older brother. I knew her younger brother. And I was just like, Tracy, you don't have to come at me with a pitch book and coerce me to come and sit at Applebee's for an hour. Just, what do you need?
So painful.
Yeah, it's just like, look, I'll cover lunch.
I went to the training. They said I had to use this pitch book, and now I have to put it on an iPad so I can swipe my fingers. Yeah, no.
And I told her, I was like, look, what do you need? Like, how much do you want me to give? And I think a lot of us, like, a lot of folks like get paralyzed with that. And we don't realize that people who really love you and know you and have a relationship with you, they want to be challenged.
Yes.
Like they want to be challenged to give sacrificial. I think that's a word that has gone out of style. Sacrificial giving for us as Christians, it's like not just I get $10 here, $11 there, $18. No, like my God has blessed my business. God has blessed my life. What do you need? It makes me feel good. It makes people.
Well, that's the other phrase that I've seen work really well is, would you consider, I would not consider this an ask, but it may be a preface, but the phrase, a gift that you'd be proud of. So it's a little different than sacrificial, but we're asking leaders, and usually the people you're talking one-on-one with are leaders. And so that's why I love that. Why not tell them that? We're asking leaders or insiders. People love to be insiders, and they usually are if they're talking directly with you. We're asking some insiders or people close to us to make a gift they'd be proud of. Would you consider a gift of X, Y, Z?
Love that.
It's honoring them, but it's also the people. This is the other part that I just love. I'm a nerd. So when I was preparing to be a pastor, I saw my friends go to seminary and get weird. They went in talking human and they left talking JEDP theory and all this other stuff. And they preached on it. Like they preached like they were writing a scholarly paper, and there were people in the pews that are just trying to, make mortgage payments. They couldn't. So there was a disconnect. So I decided to try to pack it all into my undergrad. So I spent a year in Jerusalem. I studied 5 semesters of Hebrew. I studied Second Temple Judaism and early Christianity. I studied 3 semesters of Greek, a couple ancient, some Koine. So I tried to pack it all in. And one of the things that we do ourselves a disservice. This may be a surprise for people listening, and I'm sorry if this offends you, but as far as I know, Jesus never became a Christian. Jesus stayed a Jew. And so learning some about Judaism isn't about appropriating it, but it learns the culture of what he's talking about. One of the things the sages say for giving, the rabbis say, is that you should only give until it hurts your family. and your ability to provide for your family. That's all you're asking for, you're asked to do. But you know what it is, Mike, for the rabbis with their percentages?
What is
They
it?
say it starts hurting your family when you're giving more than 20%.
Wow. Is that
One
right?
fifth, which blows my mind. And I love using that as a line because it's sort of like,
Wow.
I'm not even asking you to be close to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
10% would be fine.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because I had a session here with my good friend Josh Finley. We go back decades. We both grew up together in ministry. And he had a very similar perspective on that. But I love that he shared these. God asks you to sow a seed, not cast your bread on the water. Like
That's
your
good.
bread is for you and your family. And I love that.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I
and
love
then
having these conversations. Yeah.
well, and that's why it's important too, because the donor doesn't know. What I love, I have this thing, if people wanted to figure out a way to figure out what levels of gifts to be asking for, one of the biggest mistakes we unintentionally make is thinking if we just had 100 people give us $1,000, we'd have $100,000. That's not how this thing works, at least in North America in the 20th and 21st century. So if you go to giftRangeCalculator.com, you can just look at what our studies have shown of successful campaigns. One gift needs to be 10 to 25%.
Mhm.
So it's just as hard to ask for 25,000 as it is to ask for 10. So ask for the bigger gift. And it's not like you're saying take it or leave it. You're saying, I'd like you to consider a gift of this much. But when you show them the map too, you show them the gift range chart, that answers one of their questions, which is, I'm not going to give you my loaf of bread, right? You're not asking me to be on the hook for the whole thing, are you? And I often will joke, if I think the person could do it, hey, look, I'm not asking you to fund the whole budget. If you want to, we could definitely have that conversation, but another phrase that could be helpful for folks listening is if you're not in a church, because tithing has been taught different ways and really legalistically in some ways.
Yeah.
I was mostly for parachurch organizations until I pastored a church. So we talked about stewardship giving. Would you consider including us as part of your stewardship giving? And increasingly, where fewer and fewer people are affiliating with the church, that may be a language that would resonate with their faith, without your getting into the theological problems of, well, I thought my tithe was supposed to go to this place, not to you. You don't have to get into that if you don't want to. But if you like the fight, it could be go for it.
Yeah, that is beautiful because I have like my life has gotten more decentralized over time.
Yeah.
When I started my own business, my life became completely decentralized. And this is happening to a lot of folks. Like I'm on the road a lot. You're on the road a lot. I'm not married. I don't have kids. I can go here and there and work from wherever. I do have a small fellowship of leaders, of pastors I know, mentors from my church days, and they're kind of like more my community. And the folks in this community feel like a lot more like my local church family than the church I go to when I'm home.
That is a really good example, right? Yeah, that's good.
People's lives are decentralized, and you've just given us great language to be able to broach that. That's brilliant. Thank you.
One other thing that I think can really help people, and if you're on, I think it's the I think call it YouVersion now. I was one of the first 100 plans in there. It was on fundraising in the Bible. So if you're using that, just look for the fundraising in the Bible. Otherwise, you could Google fundraising in the Bible, and there's a free article on my fundraising coach site that looks at stories of people asking for money in Scripture, and it's incredibly liberating when you realize, oh, people in Scripture asked for money. I didn't create that originally. There's a guy named Charles Cole. Not Charles Colson, Whitney Kinnear, who you worked for Chuck Colson, wrote a little pamphlet called The Ministry of Fundraising. And then I expanded some stories. I asked him permission. I said, could I reprint this? And he said, nobody will want it. I said, but we need this. This is free.
Yeah.
So when you look at people like Hezekiah and David, you look at Moses asking former slaves for money. It helps you to kind of question some of your assumptions about, should I not, is it bad for me to stand up in front of the congregation saying, this is what I'm going to give? If you look at the fact that Jesus received funds from women in Luke 8, it talks about there were women funding Jesus's ministry. If you look at Paul's epistles through the lens of fundraising, they are direct mail appeals. And there's a book called God and Mammon. It's about fundraising in the New Testament. He uses very strategic wording so that it doesn't trip over Roman norms of reciprocity. Like he's using freedom language so that he's not saying, you're not obligated to give because I've given, and we're not obligated to give because we've received. It's for nerds anyways. It's
Interesting.
genius. It's really cool. But it can be really freeing because what it helps shape your narrative internally is Moses and Hezekiah, both of their experiences in fundraising, it created a worship service.
Mhm.
We are so wired for gratitude and generosity that the more we can invite people into those spaces, the closer we're calling them to God, whether they know it or not. We're calling them into who they are created to be. And that's what we get to do in the ministry of fundraising. Yeah, we're paying our bills and we're doing all this other stuff, but we are getting to, one thing we're getting to do is call them closer to God. The other thing we're getting to do is they spend 40, 60, 80 hours of their best waking hours earning money. But oftentimes, they had these values and then they're kind of going away, just like that 1% of an airplane ends up in a totally different continent.
Mm.
We get to bring them back and say, hey, remember how this is something that's important to you? This is a way we get to help them re-sanctify all the work that they're doing and bring
Mm.
purpose back to something that may just seem like putting in time. So it is a tremendous ministry. And you can tell I'm excited about asking for money. I
Yeah.
think it's a great way to spread the gospel.
Well, this is brilliant because, and I just want to say thank you too, because you're giving me perspective. Because when when I left vocational ministry and I went into business, and now I've been in business by 6, 7 years, and God's really blessed it. And there was always kind of this sensation like, am I on the right path? Did I miss something? Should I have stayed in church? Well, now I made a big impact in business, probably bigger than I did when I was working at church.
Yeah.
But as I've grown, I've come to this truth to realize this, to piggyback on what you're saying. And I just want to say this for all of those who are watching or listening right now. Sometimes the only way for God to get to your heart is through your wallet. And I've seen that happen countless times in my own life and in business people around me. They're good people. They're good people. They go to church. They take care of their kids. They're wonderful employers. They're wonderful people. And they will still say, oh my gosh, every time God impresses upon my heart to give, it hurts a little bit in a good way. And I want to echo what you're saying and give context to that, for all of you who are listening, because that appeal, that ask, can be a really pivotal moment in someone else's life, not just for you and your ministry and for the people you serve. So,
well, here's the other part that's counterintuitive and really important about the ministry of fundraising. It is like a scalpel that God uses to free us from all that binds us. We have so many misconceptions about money, about provision, about God's role in our finances, about our self-identity with our finances, that as we are asking, we have to continually keep coming back to, I believe in this cause. I believe in this ministry. I believe in this mission, and I am willing to put myself out there. And it forces us to refine ourselves in a way that most other work doesn't force us to. So I think it's a huge part of discipleship. It's almost like discipleship on steroids when you're out there doing asking, because you're putting yourself out there and you're getting a lot of rejection or a lot of less than you expect. And there is a numbers game to it of the more conversations you have and the more you ask, the more you're going to receive. But you got to keep having that resiliency of not taking it personally and going back and wondering, maybe this is what you said, Mike, was right. So maybe I didn't have that experience with this owner. So maybe it's this next person that I'll have the experience with that will be able to see it this way.
Well, Marc, this has been incredibly helpful. Everyone, we have all of Marc's links in the notes for this session. Ask Without Fear for Christian Ministry, helping you connect donors with causes that have an eternal impact. Marc has also written a number of other books I highly recommend. And all these links, like the calculator, all these reports, so helpful in a lot of the language. And I know you mentioned Phil Jones. I'm wondering if it's Phil Jones who wrote Exactly What to Say.
Yes.
Is it?
Yeah, he's a friend of mine.
I've met Phil, and his book is unbelievable.
Yeah, and if you listen, so for any of you that are listening, if you're looking for an audible thing, Phil's Persuade and Get Paid actually has a lot of applications for social causes and ministries too. And just bragging point, the Marc that he talks about in that studio audience was me. So he put me on the hot seat, or I jumped in and then realized that I got a free coaching session. So he
is brilliant. He's brilliant too. So
amazing.
Marc, thank you. You're brilliant. You are brilliant. Thank you for all the work that you're doing. This work is going to just impact thousands and thousands of people. I'm grateful for you, brother.
And thank you for you and all the people that are watching this, because the world, other things are making good impacts in the world, but you all are making eternal impacts. And please don't grow weary in doing good, because the
Yeah.
world needs more of what you're doing.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, brother.